Good morning and welcome to the Gita in Action podcast. My name's Radha and I'm here with family of seekers on this Thursday studying the Bhagavad Gita, talking about its relevance to our lives so that we can live a more God-centered life. That's our goal here, right? That's what we're doing here, trying to develop more of that God-like vision in the way that we interact with people and things and life, right? So today we are finishing chapter 4. I think not quite finishing it, almost finishing it. We're going to start at, where are we, guys? Are we on 36? I think we're on 36. We're going to start on 36 today, text 36, chapter 4, text 36. Does anyone want to volunteer to read today? Danny? Great. Do you want to read today? I think we'll do 4 verses. So we'll start with that. And whenever you're ready, you can read 436.
Okay. Even if you are considered to be the most sinful of all sinners, when you are situated in the boat of transcendental knowledge, you will be able to cross over the ocean of miseries.
Great. Okay. So the material world is sometimes compared to an ocean of ignorance, right? And in the ocean, even if a person's a really good swimmer, they'll still struggle to survive. But if someone comes and lifts them up from the ocean, then they're saved, right? Because being in a boat is safer than just being out there in the ocean, struggling on your own, right? So we board the boat of transcendental knowledge, and in that way we can cross the material world. That's the analogy here. So what this verse is saying is that this is such an exalted process that anybody and everybody can be liberated. Right? So like no matter how low you are, no matter how sick you think you are, the medicine will work on you. Right? The process is just so elevated, is just so effective that it doesn't matter. So this knowledge can purify anyone and everyone. Never think that you're too sick to take the medicine. And what's important is not where we are as much as where we're looking. Right? So we've talked a lot about the modes of nature. We'll talk about them more in the later sections, later chapters, but we've talked about goodness, passion, and ignorance, right? And how these are the material energies that we fall under influence of. And so the different things that we do, that our actions, our thoughts, they're all influenced by one of these energies, goodness, passion, and ignorance. And so all of us are situated in some variation of those throughout the day, throughout our lives, um, a lot of Indians are focused are situated in goodness. India is a very like pious state. I mean, more and more it's influenced by the West, but a lot of India is, a lot of Indians are situated in goodness. So in that, when we talk about ignorance, passion, goodness, on top of goodness is transcendence, right? Right above goodness is transcendence, that mode of sadhu or that mode of sudu sattva, right? And and in that they're close to Krishna, right? Because they're situated at that highest material mode, and the next level up is the mode of transcendence, right? So they're close to Krishna. But Prabhupada would give an analogy that even though they're close to Krishna, they're looking away, right? So even though they're situated in that mode, that they're influenced by that sattva mode, they're looking away. And he would say people in the West, even though we're more in ignorance and passion, we're looking towards Krishna, right? Because when he came, in the 60s, 70s, people were kind of over material enjoyment. They were kind of done with it. And they got really into spiritual life really fast. And they were really enthusiastic and looking towards Krishna, even though they were situated in maybe a lower material mode. So again, it's not so much where we are, but where we're looking, because that's what's going to dictate where we're going to go. And if we're in a high mode, but we're just sitting there, we're not transforming, we're not making any progress, then, almost better that we're in a lower mode, but we're making a lot of progress, because in that way we can reach that highest level of transcendence. As long as we're making progress, that's what's important. The other thing here is we're not our thoughts or actions or behaviors. So from whatever mode that you're acting, if you're, not so proud of your actions, or you've done some things in the past that You think, oh, maybe I shouldn't have done that, right? That's not you, right? That's the influence of the mode that you're at. And again, as long as we're looking to go higher, you're in a good place. And at our very essence, we're pure spirit souls, right? So even all of that, all this material conditioning is not us, right? And if we're all a little bit honest and introspective, we'll see that we all have some level of dark desires or thoughts inside of us, right? From time to time, things that we're not proud of. Some of us may act on them more than others, right? But we all have sides that we maybe try to hide from the world a little bit, right? From time to time. We don't want to get stuck in this mode, stuck in these labels as good or bad, right? Kind of labeling ourselves or others. Again, because at the essence, everyone is part of God. Everyone is part and parcel of God. And the purpose of this human life is to go beyond these parts of ourselves, right? Beyond our actions, our thoughts, our material conditioning, go beyond these parts of ourselves to the soul. Because that's what's real, that's what's eternal, that's what's everlasting. And we can do this by being guided by this transcendental knowledge. So this verse is nice because it's like we should never get discouraged. No matter where we are, no matter where we've been, there's always hope for us, right? If we stick to the process and we keep looking forward, doesn't matter where you are, where you've been. And the beautiful thing about this path is that God is so merciful that he gives us multiple chances, right? So this in this material existence, our soul is eternal. It travels on through body after body after body. And in that is our evolution or our devolution. I hope devolution's a word of consciousness, right? So we're either increasing our consciousness or decreasing our consciousness. But it's not like you're here once, you get one chance at life, and if you screw it up, your soul's eternally doomed to hell, right? That's not what's happening here. We get it's we get multiple chances. Our soul just goes on and on and on, depending on our karma, depending on our desires, depending on how we decide to, spend this life in terms of our thoughts and our actions and where we're going, whether we're elevating our consciousness or whether we're degrading. And we'll receive a body that suits that respectively. And if we're continuing this path of evolution, if we're continuing to evolve and evolve and evolve, then we'll reach that mode of transcendence and we'll go back to God. But we get so many chances. It's beautiful, right? So you're never too low, and there's always another chance. You get another chance, right? And God comes regularly as incarnations. He appears in different forms as his holy name, right? He makes himself available in each and every one of our hearts as super soul, even if we don't turn to him, even if we don't see him, even if we don't listen to him once in our whole lives, right? He's always there. So he gives us multiple chances and he continually shows up for us. So it is ultimately it's us that's alienated ourselves from God, right? But he'll accept us no matter how fallen we are. And he gives us those unlimited chances. So all we have to do is jump aboard this boat of transcendental knowledge to cross beyond the ocean of distress to the shore of eternity. Right? And this is God's unlimited, unending grace. So if someone desires, if you just have the desire to become situated in this mode of transcendence above the sattva mode, right? No matter how sinful you are, what you've done in your past, where you've been, you can be elevated. Right? Anybody can be elevated if they want to be elevated. So we need this human form of life to understand spirituality. That's kind of a requirement. Then after that, we need transcendental knowledge. And that's kind of the progression. So this verse really should give us all a lot of hope. Sometimes it's pretty easy to get bogged down in guilt or shame or stuck in your past or your past decisions or I shouldn't have done this or, I'm never going to be good enough, right? And we should know that these are just our own narratives, just our own judgments, right? And that God doesn't see us like that. God gives us unlimited chances, just over and over and over again. Right? And no matter from where you are, you can be elevated. And there's so many stories in scriptures, right, of really degraded people that were elevated so fast just by this, right? Just by the mercy of a devotee and the understanding of transcendental knowledge. And it could just change your life in an instant. So we should never let our minds get the best of us. Okay, text 37. Does anybody want to share anything before we move on? Okay, remember this verse whenever you're feeling really low or really bad about yourself or like you're too sick to take the medicine, right? You're never too sick to take the medicine. All right, let's move on to 237 then. Danny?
As a blazing fire turns firewood to ashes, O Arjuna, so does the fire of knowledge burn to ashes all reactions to material activities.
Okay, so this is another example to show how transcendental knowledge liberates. And this example and the past example of the boat in the ocean, these are two examples that describe these 2 points progressively. So the first we talked about in the last verse, there's an ocean, and we get out of the ocean, and spiritual knowledge offers a way for us to get out of that ocean, to get out of this material world, right? Our material conceptions, material conditioning. The second one talks more about what is inside of us, our own anartas, right? Our own bad reactions, our greed, our envy, our false ego, our illusion, our pride, right? All of these anartas, all of our bad actions, they get burned out. So in the last analogy, when we talked about getting out of the ocean, the water is still there, right? The material existence is still there. We're just getting out of it. But with the wood and the firewood gets completely burned and the karma gets completely destroyed. Right? So here he's saying perfect knowledge of ourself and super soul and of their relationship is compared to fire. And that fire burns up all reactions, both good and bad, and everything is burned to ashes. So this is similar to the verse, and if you remember a few verses back in 419 when we talked about the seed, the karmic seed, and how the seed gets roasted, and then the desire to sin gets burned, and therefore your karmic reaction gets burned, right? This is similar to that, right? Krishna's referring to how a person doesn't get karmically bound just by having this spiritual knowledge, just by understanding the self, the super soul, and the relationship between the two, how that keeps one from getting bound in this karmic cycle, from getting stuck in this karmic cycle, controlled by their reactions, right? The point is that a person who acquires this knowledge from a spiritual master, and as we talked about in 434, that knowledge burns like an inner fire that burns everything, and it burns all the sinful reactions. And the karma is like a seed, like we talked about in 419, remember? And when the seed is burnt, it doesn't give any results. So we become free from good and bad reactions. And this spiritual knowledge takes us there. So again, this chapter, this section is really talking about the glories of transcendental knowledge. It's not even so much talking about what transcendental knowledge is, as much as the glories of it, as much as how powerful, how transformational it can be in our lives. Just by knowing it, just by slowly realizing it, the change that we can see in our lives, both this life and our next life. So 438. Does anybody want to share anything before we move on to 438? 438.
In this world, there is nothing so sublime as and pure as transcendental knowledge. Such knowledge is the mature fruit of all mysticism. And one who has become accomplished in the practice of devotional service enjoys this knowledge within himself in due course of time.
So 438 here. Again, there's nothing as pure as this transcendental knowledge. Transcendental knowledge is the knowledge of the soul and the connection with the super soul, right? So far, Krishna's mostly just talked about the results of the knowledge, not so much what it is, but that's what it is. So like kind of commit that to your memory. This transcendental knowledge is knowledge of the soul and connection with the super soul. Right? And Krishna is glorifying the knowledge that one acquires by practicing spirituality. He's saying there's nothing as pure as this. He's saying when one accomplishes this, we delight just within ourselves, right? Because the soul is by nature joyful. If we remember back in chapter 2, the three qualities of the soul, Satya Ananda, eternal, full of knowledge, full of bliss. Its nature is joyful, just in and of itself, right? It doesn't need all these external things to be happy. It doesn't, it's just resonates joy. It's just joy in its essence. If we could even like imagine that, right? Because we are so tied to our material conditioning of like, oh, this makes me happy, this makes me sad. No, the soul is just joyful at its essence. That's what it is. And the soul's joyfulness can naturally be experienced when we start connecting to God, right? When we plug it into source, when we plug our soul into source, then it can naturally be experienced. That joy just kind of resonates throughout our being, right? And the more and more connected that we become to source, the more we plug into that outlet, the more that we're going to feel that joy, the more that we're going to be kind of electrified by electrified. Is that even a word? I don't know. I'm making up words today. By that joy, right? It's plug into source and the soul just resonates its natural quality, its natural essence, right? In this material existence, as we're navigating around, normally our mind is kind of an internal mess, right? But when we can calm the mind by the practice of yoga, we can see what's deeper inside, which is the soul. And we therefore see the qualities of the soul, the essence of the soul. Kind of like the bottom of a pond, right? When the pond is restless at the top, we can't see the bottom. It's really like murky and dirty. But when the pond is calm, we can see the bottom. So similarly, when our mind is super agitated, we can't see what's below. When we're so caught in the ups and downs of the day, right? We can't see what's below. The soul's covered like that. But when we start practicing yoga, the mind becomes calm and we can see within. And that way we can start relishing happiness within. So this happens in due course of time, right? That's another thing he says in this verse, in due course of time. So we can't artificially accelerate things, right? We can't practice premature renunciation like we talked about in chapter 3. We have to work steadily in a detached mood, right? And trust the process. It's kind of like when a flower is in bud form, like when it's in its little seed, it grows at its own pace, right? We can only do so much. We want to nourish it, we want to take care of it, but we can't like control its pace necessarily, right? And similarly, our love is in bud size, right? Like our capacity to love is in bud size in this material existence because it's limited to just matter, right? Our capacity to love, it's just extended to matter, more or less. But as the bud blossoms gradually, it'll grow and it will reach its potential, its full potential to love God, right? And it'll reach its full spiritual beauty. And that's like the bud as it grows and it blossoms. Similar, to the flower bud, that as it grows, it, blossoms and reaches its full potential. So that's where we are. We're kind of this little bud state as our love is so limited to just this material existence. And we're in the process, we're trying to water and trying to nurture this little seedling so that it can reach its full spiritual potential, so that our love can increase, so that our capacity to love can increase to more than just this material existence, right? But again, just as we can't accelerate the blossoming of a flower beyond the rate decided by nature, we can't accelerate the expansion of our love beyond the rate decided by God. It happens at its own pace. So we can only follow the process. We can only nurture it. How much purification that we need is going to be different for every person. So this process is going to be different for every person, from every place, wherever you are in your life. So we just have to commit to the process and be patient, right? Have faith in the process and be patient. And that can be difficult for us, right? Because in this world of like instant things, it's kind of what we expect, right? We have instant food, we have instant coffee, we have instant control, right? Anymore, you have instant to the cameras around your house and the thermostat in your house, right? Or even like opening and unlocking your door. Everything is so instant, right? We think that we should have instant spirituality. Like you press a button and the consciousness becomes devotional. But the consciousness doesn't work like that. It requires purification and it takes time.
But in this verse, Krishna is assuring us that this will definitely happen. We will reach this point where we can relish within ourselves, right? Where that pond water will clear and we can see what's beneath. We can experience that eternal joy that is actually our very essence that is covered by this material conditioning. And as we advance in spiritual life, and many of you have probably already experienced this, but we find satisfaction in simple things, right? Like we don't need tons of fancy things to be happy. Fancy vacations, fancy items, clothes, houses, cars, right? Not that if we have those things, we don't enjoy them to some extent, but our happiness doesn't depend on them. Right. And we see that as we progress down this spiritual path because we're relishing a deeper joy that's inside of us. We're starting to get glimpses into that. And therefore, some of these external things that are pretty superficial, we don't really turn to for joy anymore because we see how limited that satisfaction is compared to what we're experiencing internally when we can start doing some of that work of settling the pond, of settling the restless mind, of detaching ourselves from the ups and downs of our days, right? Of our lives, and starting to get a little bit more steady, a little bit more stable in our relationship with God, and therefore relishing in that, right? So this will happen as you progress down this spiritual path. You won't need as complex things to be happy. But we also don't have to worry about making this transition either. Like it will just happen naturally if we just focus on the process. Right? Our connection with God will give us this inner stability, and we won't get so shaken by the external things or external pleasures. They'll be just like little bloops, just like little waves in a big ocean. Not to be confused with the ocean we talked about at the beginning, but these things will just not even impact us because our consciousness is so steady. That's the goal, and that's where we're getting. And if we think about it, we probably have all experienced that to some degree already. Right? So in the meantime, we should just focus on God and the process and not on our shortcomings. Right? It's always good to be aware of our shortcomings, right? It's always good to be aware of like what you need to work on. Right? But we don't have to like overly focus on them. And this isn't like complacency. This doesn't mean that we just say, all right, I'm just following the process. God will take care of the rest. Right? But we're talking about our inner feelings. So despite practicing the process, that's a given. We're practicing the process. We're committed to it. We're talking about our inner feelings. We're not getting too focused on where we are and where we're not. Right? We're not too worried about our shortcomings. Right? We're being humble, and we're not expecting instant spiritual happiness, right? Prematurely or unrealistically. We're knowing that it happens with time. In the meantime, we're not getting too bogged down in our shortcomings, right? And things that we're not so happy about within ourselves. We see them and we trust that God will kind of make them go away. So if you have any like really bad habits right now that you're struggling to break, right? Maybe it's gossiping, maybe it's some kind of drug, maybe whatever it is. We don't have to get too worried about that, too caught up in it, right? If we just stick to the process, if we just stick to whatever part of your consciousness that you have, that you can commit, that you can connect with God, if you just keep sticking to that part of your consciousness will grow and grow and grow, and therefore the part of your consciousness that's maybe a little bit degraded will get overtaken by it. And that's how the process works. We don't have to like turn it off. We don't have to worry about turning it off. Good to know, good to have the goal, but we don't have to get overly worried about it or involved with it, right? Don't worry about the ups and downs. Just focus on the process. And the more that we render expectation-free service, so this selfless service that we're talking about, the more that we relish satisfaction in that service in itself, we can advance towards love and happiness that exceeds all of our expectations. Right? So that's what we're looking to do, dropping our expectations associated with the fruits of our actions. And that's what selfless service really is, right? We're not looking to get anything external out of it, whether that be in the form of like money or even like, accolades or attention or, whatever it be. Whatever it is, good or bad, we're okay with that. We're just committed to the service in a selfless way for God, right? And that's how we experience. If we can stick to that process, if we can stick to doing that, we can get to this place of love and happiness that exceeds all of our expectations. Okay, so the next two verses, Christian's going to talk about faith, why we should have faith, and what happens if we don't have faith. This will be our last verse for the day, 39. Does anybody want to share anything before we move on? Okay, let's move on to our last one.
A faithful man who is dedicated to transcendental knowledge and who subdues his senses is eligible to achieve such knowledge. And having achieved it, he quickly attains the supreme spiritual peace.
So 39. So in this section, generally, 35 to 38, Krishna has talked about the glory of transcendental knowledge, right? Just how powerful this knowledge is. So in text 35, we talked about on Monday, he says it frees us from illusion and it gives us spiritual vision, right? Those are two things that spiritual knowledge does. It frees us from this material illusion and it gives us spiritual vision. 36, which we just talked about, says it elevates even the most sinful persons, right? Even the lowest, most degraded people, it can elevate because this process is so powerful. That gives us a lot of hope. Right? Text 37 says it burns away all karmic reactions. So all the reactions that we've done, good or bad, burned away as we get kind of pulled out of this material existence that's bound by these material laws. Right? 38 says that there's nothing else pure and it will enable us to relish happiness within. Again, we talked about the pond being murky at the top, just like our mind being restless. But when that can get calm, we could see what's at the bottom of it. We could really relish that essence of the soul. Now he's going to talk about the role of faith. We need faith to acquire peace. So it's kind of part of this equation. To get to this peaceful state, we need some faith. People that have this faith get knowledge. Right? So this verse says that one who is faithful, one who has some faith, one who's regulated their senses, and one who's spiritually attached will gain knowledge. So those three things, right? After acquiring knowledge, then that peace comes, that peaceful state. The previous verse said due course of time. Krishna is reassuring us here that it doesn't take too long, right? Once we get some knowledge, the peace comes soon. So Krishna is saying that the faithful acquire knowledge. Right? We normally think that the more that I study, the more that my faith increases, right? And we all feel that, like that's true. But Krishna is saying that faith leads to knowledge. So is it that faith leads to knowledge or does knowledge lead to faith? It actually works both ways, right? So the more faith that you have, the more knowledge that you get, the more knowledge that you have, your faith builds. So it just kind of builds on itself. So as a starting point, we all need some kind of faith to kind of start the journey, right? It's like the first stage in Rupa Goswami's stages of devotional service, right? Is this faith, right? So we all need like a little bit of faith, even just like a small amount, right? Like just a little baby amount of faith. Just have a little bit, and that will make us inquire about it, right? So when we study the Gita, we should have some basic level of faith, right? That there might be something here that's of substance that can help me. And when we start with that little level of faith, that there might be something here that could be beneficial to me, we'll get some knowledge, right? And as we get that knowledge, some of our doubts start to get clarified. And as our doubts start to get clarified, our faith increases. And then that in itself just motivates us to get more knowledge. So in this way, the faith and the knowledge, they reinforce each other. However, to even begin, we need at least like some little seed of faith. Just like if somebody's taken treatment for a disease to improve their health, right? They have to have some level of faith in that treatment to even pursue it, right? Because if they have no faith in it, they're not even going to pursue it. Like, what's the point, right? So, and they might not know exactly what's going to happen, but they have some level of faith. So, in that same way, we have to have a little bit of faith when we start our spiritual journey, right? Just a little bit that there might be something here that can benefit me and that can elevate me, right? So the entire process starts with faith. And if we're struggling to even get that little seed of faith, we can think that, like, even science requires a little bit of faith, right? Like if a scientist observes something in the universe that he doesn't understand, but he tries to figure it out, he must have some level of faith that there's some order to the universe, that there's some language of nature that he might not understand, but that exists, right? That he has the capacity to understand. That has to be there to even pursue it, right? So if we really think about it, anything that we do within our day requires some level of faith. Right? Like if somebody's digging for a treasure, they have to have some level of faith that the treasure exists and that they have the capacity to get to it, right? Or they wouldn't even bother. They wouldn't even bother investing the time, right? So similarly, when we approach spirituality, there will be things that we don't understand, and that's okay. Expect that. But we have some inherent faith, right? We seek maybe some deeper meaning and purpose in the world, or deeper peace and bliss within the heart, and we believe that it exists. That in itself is just enough faith just to kind of get started, right? Faith allows us to perceive this spiritual truth in a way that resonates with our deeper self, because spirituality is non-material, right? So we can't understand it empirically like we can the nature of the material world around us. Right? So we have to have a little bit of faith, and this faith allows us to perceive the spiritual truth in a way that resonates with our deeper self. And the Gita says that the highest reality is God, and that he communicates us through scriptural revelation, the language of love. And that's what we're doing here, right? So we get a little bit of faith. Okay, let's all assume we have a little bit of faith. And then developing this faith is a process. We have to understand that too. It's not like, you just flip on a light and all of a sudden you have all of this faith. It doesn't quite work like that. It's a process. So when we're studying, there's going to be different levels of things that resonate with us, right? Like first there'll be some things that when we first hear, we can totally buy into, right? Like many of us are here because we tried lots of different material things to make us happy and they still felt empty, right? And so we have some little amount of faith that there's something greater out there, right? And so there'll be some things that we hear that we can buy into right away, right? Some things that are maybe a little bit harder, that take a little bit more contemplation and discussion, right? Like this concept that I'm not the body or the mind, I'm the spirit soul. Okay, that might take a little bit of contemplation and discussion. Some things that we'll realize after years of practice and purification. So some things we'll hear and we'll be like, I can't really buy into that right now. That's okay. Sometimes things take years, right? And then there's some things that we'll never understand. And this is the process of faith, right? To think that it's like all or nothing, or that you just jump in blindly, that's not really realistic, right? But if we start studying scripture and we have doubts about everything, we'll get into trouble because it'll suck our energy. Right? So we have to develop faith by focusing on what is important and putting other things aside. So if there's some things that you can't quite buy into when you're reading or when you're hearing, that's okay. Just put them in that category. I don't quite understand that. Maybe I'll never understand it. Whatever it is, put it in a lower category, right? And move ahead with the things that you do buy into, the things that do resonate with you. And this is the way that we do anything in life, right? People who study quantum physics don't understand everything about it on their first day, right? There's a structure that's given to us that we understand, right? But it's a progression of understanding. So this is how we understand anything. So similarly, we have to understand that there's some things that are going to take time, right? And our faith will get choked if we can't categorize knowledge in this way, right? So the other thing is that just saying that we have faith is not enough, right? Like just saying, oh, God exists. I believe God exists. You believe God exists? I believe God exists. That's kind of like a preliminary level of faith, right? It has to be reflected in our actions. So if we have faith that God exists, we need to have faith that he loves us and that the perfection of life is to return his love. And that'll give us the greatest happiness, right? When we can develop faith in that, it's a much higher level of faith. Not just a faith in the existence of God, but faith that he's our well-wisher and the supreme object of love. And that's a far greater love. And this level of faith is reflected in our actions. So when we actually understand the higher spiritual reality, we become attracted to it. This is what happens. This is the process, right? We can regulate my interaction with this external material world, knowing that that consciousness kind of pulls us away from this higher consciousness, right? If we're unregulated and enjoying the things of this world, then our consciousness, it can't focus on the spiritual things, right? It takes up too much space, right? And there's a difference between like academically studying scriptures and doing it with a devotional heart, right? Because when we're doing it with a devotional heart, it's going to redirect our heart. If you're doing it with just your mind, that's where you're going to stay, right? It's going to be limited to just the mind. So we want to know that when we're studying, right? Like an academic scholar may have a high level of intellect, right? But that doesn't give them authority into the inner aspects of spiritual knowledge, right? They're not experiencing anything internally just because they're understanding it with their mind. Right? The whole purpose of the Gita is transformation. So it'd be like a cook who's cooking but not eating. In that same way, we have to approach the text with the intention of transformation of the heart. And this is how we acquire knowledge. Right? We understand that I'm a part of God and I'm meant to harmonize with God. And in that way, we can more easily tolerate the ups and downs of life. So whatever happens in life, I'm just going to keep stay in my lane, keep serving God because that's my nature. And once we become situated in that understanding of our constitutional position, we'll attain this supreme peace. Brings us back to this supreme peace. And when we think about it, when we have this enjoyer mentality, when we think that we're the enjoyer, right? We're not the enjoyer, but this material illusion makes us think that we're the enjoyer, right? We have so many conditions to depend on, and we can't have peace, right? Like if you're planning this grand vacation and you have all these expectations, right? And then you get there and then it rains, and then the family's fighting, and then the car breaks down, and that it's like we need all of these things to be happy, and it's dependent on all of these things, right? And in that way, our mind is not peaceful at all. Even before the vacation, maybe we're worried about all these potential things that can go wrong, and trying to, check into them all to mitigate them, to make sure that it doesn't. Thinking that we're the controllers, thinking that we're the enjoyers, right? If that's where we're looking to get our happiness and our peace from, it's not going to happen, right? We may get some level of happiness for a short time, but even that's going to go away because we're not the controllers, we're not the enjoyers. Right? When we understand that I'm actually the servant, then whatever happens, I'll keep serving God, and that's what gives us this ultimate peace. Right? Peace comes by knowing God. Even the Bible says, peace that passeth all understanding. Right? We can't understand with our external material vision how a devotee can be in turbulence but is still peaceful. Right? But this is because a devotee is strongly connected to God. They're getting their security from God. They're getting their stability from God, not from these things in the material existence. So in that way, when it starts to kind of go away, they're still very strongly connected. They're very stable. Right? If we tie our horse to something that's not, which is basically anything in this material existence, right? If we say this one vacation I go on a year is the happiest thing in my life, and then all of a sudden a storm passes through and it doesn't happen, we're completely upset, we're completely devastated, and that's just like one example of how many things that we tie our we tie our ticket to in this world, our ticket for happiness. So tie it to God, and we practice that every day. And we see how much peace and happiness that comes from it. So the last point here that we'll talk about are obstacles to faith, right? We all have obstacles to faith. Faith in God takes courage. It takes courage to trust. And sometimes in this material existence, we'll go into relationships naively thinking that everyone is super trustworthy. Did anybody ever do that? Right? That's like my MO. That's like my thing, right? So we go into these relationships thinking that everybody's super trustworthy, and then we end up getting exploited, right? Exploited, betrayed, disappointed, right? And then after that, we may like recoil to the other extreme of being super cynical about everybody, right? Anybody ever do this? right? Because you've been betrayed in a certain relationship, or you start to just believe that nobody's trustworthy, right? And you start seeing everything is selfish, even if that person's like kind or affectionate, right? I had a little bit of this when I started dating my husband after I got out of like a pretty bad relationship. I was like, this guy's not sincere. We still like joke about that because that was like my first like reaction. Even though he's like, one of the most sincere people I know, it was like my initial reaction because my vision was a little bit tainted by my history, right? So we can kind of go between the two, right? But between these two extremes of like being super naive and being super cynical, there's a place of trust, right? Where we can acknowledge that everybody has demons, but we learn to use our intelligence and our experience to better meter the amount of trust and love that we give out, right? Knowing that we need to be loved. It's a need. We can't just deny it forever. So we have to learn to trust in kind of a safe zone. We have to kind of learn to better meter our love and our trust and to use our intelligence and our experience to help guide that. This kind of trust is not naive but courageous. So this is the kind of trust that we need to have for the Supreme Being, right? Only then can we obtain this transcendental knowledge, if we can get to that place of trust. We also have to practice regulation and dedication with this. That's the other thing this verse is saying, regulating our senses and committing ourselves to the process, right? This is how we can use our intelligence to make our heart just the super fertile place for the experiment of bhakti. Because that's what it is here, right? We can't, it's not just like a club that we join or we jump into and we say, okay, I'm going to start dressing like this and believing this and saying this. No, it's a process. We're building faith, we're building a relationship, and it takes time. It takes time, it takes attention, it takes nourishment, and it takes honesty too, right? About where we are and where we aren't. And that's what we're doing. So as we can kind of progress down that path with a certain level of faith, a certain level of commitment, a certain level of self-control, we can make steady progress. And that's what Krishna is saying here in this verse. So in the next verse, Krishna is going to talk about the consequences if you don't have faith. So that's where we are. We're going to stop here. Does anybody want to? Oh, Trevor, I didn't even see that your hand was up, but now I see it. So now you can share.
Very well said, everything. Talking about faith, Jesus explained it in the way having faith the size of a mustard seed will help you move mountains and whatnot. And that's all it takes is the courage to, just uh, experiment with the transcendental energy, place yourself around it. You don't have to understand everything. And a tip I give to people in the class I do, whenever we're starting the book, especially, which I remind throughout the book, but I'm like, because in the beginning it explains so many names and so much, it's like, wow, how do I put this together? It's a lot when you first read the book. So I tell them, don't pay attention so much to the details of the information. Approach it heart first, and notice the energy behind the word, and take note to how you feel before you engage in the katha meditation, and then how you feel during and how you feel afterwards. The energy never lies, and neither does the results. So that's what I noticed. And that's how I became so attracted to it, and how the scriptures just prove themselves to be fully potent and authentic. Doesn't leave any information out. It devours doubt. It doesn't leave any room for doubt. So it's like you get to the point eventually to where there's no room for beliefs. It's just knowledge, And just partaking in these methods of meditation, japa, kirtan, katha. Yeah, it just it proves its own authenticity through you experiencing results and attracting different experiences in your life and whatnot, whether they're internal or external. It's like I've experienced so much that I didn't understand until reading these books and whatnot.
Yeah, I love that what you said there. Notice how you feel before and how you feel after. Like it really is it's an experiment of love. And these texts, these practices, they invoke love that's like palatable, palpable. I'm really messing up my words
Palatable.
today, but palpable. And we feel it, you know? So in that way, like whatever it is that is doing that, you know, that you're experiencing, put your faith in that and don't worry about the rest.
They explain it like the mind with all the excessive thinking and whatnot to be like a elephant on fire, and then these meditations, especially Katha here, we're all centering our mind as a group. Group meditation is very powerful, by the way. It's very amplified and a lot easier to put your mind in that place. But it's like that elephant on fire just jumping into a pond or a lake or something. It just immediately puts it out. So even during the meditation, it's very noticeable its effects, and then you can see in comparison to how you started, how effective it is. Then the results
Yeah.
come and your experiences and whatnot. I mean,
Yeah.
and whenever we finished the book, it took me close to 3 years with my last group. We did the last class just going over uh, what we manifested in our hearts and the adversity that arose throughout the whole meditation and how much got washed away and whatnot, and where we're at now, how much more love for God manifested in our hearts and whatnot. It was really epic. I had a
Yeah.
pretty long list of results and whatnot from the people and whatnot. I was taking little footnotes like a doctor.
No, that's amazing. And such a
It was
good
pretty
practice
awesome.
too, even to even just kind of stop and think about how much you've transformed, how much your heart's transformed over the course of doing these practices or these processes. Even
No
that in
doubt.
itself helps to build that faith. That's beautiful. Thank you for sharing.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thanks for having the class.
Thank you. Devi Radhika, please share with us. You're on mute. Yeah.
Hi, good morning. Hare Krishna, everyone. Trevor, thanks for sharing that insight and for everyone for always being here to share their hearts and their thoughts. Trevor, you mentioned the mustard seed, and when you were beginning this conversation, Radha, it came to mind something that I learned a long time ago about faith. And when you're in that, your analogies, I love your analogies, they're so awesome. When you're in that mud and you're in that muck and you're like the lotus that's just like stuck. I was in a very dark place in my life. I had no hope. I had no faith. I had nothing. I was as empty as I probably could have possibly been, although I've been there a few more times since. But the beginning and my point is that I learned then, and it keeps coming back to me over and over again, this idea of a mustard seed, and that all you need to begin is a mustard seed's worth of faith. And a mustard seed essentially is like a pinhead sized seed. If you've ever seen one, it's like 1 millimeter in size. It's the teeniest little thing ever. But if you have that amount of faith, the seed itself, like a garden, if you plant it, if you cultivate it, if you talk to it, you water it, you love it, you weed out the things that come to doubt your seed and your faith, it grows into the most it yields one of the most bountiful crops, this little teeny tiny pinhead of a seed. And it's such a great reminder. And I really appreciate you bringing that full circle, because a lot of people and a lot of times, and you do get caught up in the material world around you, wherever you are in your spiritual journey, it's like the ocean. And sometimes you're in the midst of that top and that mud and that, turmoil. And other times you get an opportunity to sink and, you're kind of buoyant. Sometimes you're up here, sometimes you're just down in, the peaceful calm. But, returning to that faith and those practices that bring us faith, and sometimes just returning to the fact that like right now, right here in this moment, I still have that mustard seed. It brings hope. So thanks.
So nicely said. Yeah, and if you're struggling in your day, even just remembering, kind of like what Trevor said, that how you feel when you do these practices, even that is just like motivation to come back to it
Love you.
and know that
Shh.
even just a
Don't
little
tweet
bit
that.
will go a long ways.
Krishna first, always.
Does anybody else want to share? Kalpana, are you still in? Yeah, please share.
Yes, Hare Krishna. The starting itself was so nice and so beautiful, saying that God is so kind, giving us multiple opportunities during this lifetime. And, whenever I sit down and I start thanking God, just the tears start flowing just by knowing how many. So that, and then the faith. That was another such a beautiful topic. And then the seva, the service to God. So everything was so well put together. Thank you so much.
Thank you. I'm appreciating you so much, Kalpana. Thank you for that. Yeah, seeing you, it brings it to us, seeing your heart makes
Thank
us feel it.
we just heard, we hear your lectures in particles, and then yesterday we heard the chapter 17, the episode 17, where Trevor is talking about the bamboo story. And then the lecture was about, how connecting to God gives us confidence, faith, fearlessness, and all those things. It was
Yeah.
so nice.
Yeah. Yeah, the qualities of the soul that are
The
manifest
qualities of the soul. Yes,
as
it was
yeah.
so beautiful.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else want to share? Danny, do you want to share anything?
I'm actually just kind of just overcome with being grateful that I'm in the space and back in association with Krishna and devotees that make my life meaningful and remind me why I'm here. It's been a little rough the past couple of years. I was home from work. 5 years ago I was ill. In fact, last month was my 5-year anniversary, and because of Krishna's mercy, I'm officially in remission, and I just have him to thank for that. And again, just being convinced that my illness was an opportunity to deepen my relationship with Krishna. And it's very strange that when I was most ill, when it was not guaranteed that I was going to continue on this material plane, that is when I felt closest to Krishna. That is when I had the most faith. And it's the further I get from that point, you think your faith is always going to stay that strong. Like things just come back and creep in. The material world, Maya, creeps back in. The last year and a half, I've went back to work. So I haven't had enough time to all that time for association. And I've just found myself very surprised at how Maya comes creeping back in. And I just have to like Trevor just said before, Krishna first. It's Krishna first. It is, that is what is most important in my life. That is why we all believe that we are here in this life, uh, to remember Krishna, to remember that we are part and parcel of him. And once we realize that and we have that in our heart every day, if we can live from there, that's all we need. That's all the faith that we need. And I'm just very grateful again to be here. Thank you, Radha. Thank you so much.
That was so nicely said. I love how you said when you were at like your peak of faith, you just thought it would stay like that. And I think that's, we could all relate to that in different ways. Like when it's really good, when we're really feeling a close connection, we easily take it for granted or think like, oh, this is just how I am. And it's like, no, it takes constant work, constant nourishment, constant coming back, constant association, just like we're doing here with these like-minded people talking about it, reminding ourselves. We should never take it for granted. Thank you for that reminder. This beautiful share. Thank you. Mariah, do you have anything that you want to finish us off with here? You got to take yourself off mute. Is it not coming off mute?
No, I hit a button and I don't know what I did and then I couldn't get back. Everyone's share was just so beautiful and so heartfelt. And I can relate to so many of everyone's stories, just like that up and down. But today, what I have to share is just the other day, me and Luna were cleaning in her room and I had music on, and a song that came on was a Lauren Daigle song. She's like a Christian singer, but in the song, she says, what have I done to deserve love like this? And she's like talking about just feeling so overwhelmed by God's love and mercy and how she feels so undeserving of it. And Luna was like, doesn't she want his love? Like, doesn't she want it? Like, you know, 'cause she doesn't really understand. And I was just like, you know, when you go through so much pain in your life and so much darkness, and then all of a sudden you're like in this moment of like faith and trust, and you feel your connection with God is so close. It's so like overwhelming. Like Kalpana said, like you just want to cry. You have so much gratitude and so much love. It's just like these tears just flow. And you know, it's just like, yeah, you have those moments. Sometimes they're just moments, but and I was like telling Luna, I was like, you know, when you really experience God's love in your life, you do. You feel so like, what have I done? Like I'm just this insignificant little ant, you know, in this giant world. It's like, oh, but somehow I'm feeling this mercy and this love. And of course, we can know and we can take the magic out of it and be like, oh, well, God's always with us. But to actually experience it and feel it in this world that's so dark sometimes and so full of pain and so full of suffering, it's like it's miraculous. And it is, it's overwhelming and it's beautiful. And it's just, it's the, you know, it's real. It's real, even though it might be fleeting sometimes. It's so real. And, so I was just thinking about that today, just, you know, and just stay with that gratitude. And that gratitude is what helps us come back to these classes, come back to our service, come back to our devotional service, hearing, chanting, reading, remembering, association, whatever we do. And there might be days where we're like, yeah, I don't feel like doing it for whatever reason. You know, Maya tries to pull us down or whatever. But the minute you get back into it, you're like, oh, okay, yeah, that peace that you talked about, that peace just washes over you. And you're just like, this is all I needed. You know, this is all I ever need. And it's just, yeah, it's a beautiful thing. But thank you all for your beautiful shares and your open heart and bringing all this this space and bringing Krishna into this space. Like Krishna's with us right now, you know, that's a beautiful thing too. So thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you. This is such a nice share hearing from you all. Thank you
There's
all for
there's
sharing.
something I forgot. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Um,
Finish us off here, Trevor.
I was gonna say, which I'm glad Mariah spoke before I chimed back in because I can't stop talking ever. Um, back to the like energy thing, the love that Mariah's talking about is like that's what you're feeling when you're tapping into the energetic field, the transcendental energy. So information, as everything is but God's energy, even information itself is energy. That's why Krishna says, if you wish to have the knowledge to understand me, to approach me with devotion, and I'll give you the knowledge to which you can come to me. It's all about heart first. If you're doing this with love, if you're fall in love with the process, the intellect, the knowledge, all of that clarity comes as a byproduct. Like you were talking about, Radha, with the growing of the flower. Every flower has its own time to blossom. So just as long as you're watering it and you're patient, you'll fall more in love with the process. It becomes more and more attractive, and the results, like I said, don't lie. So yeah, that's basically what I forgot. And the Maya, whenever it does creep in, it is strong, but just remember, it's part of God's service. It's Maya is serving Krishna. So in actuality, when it comes, it's our duty to try to perceive it in a way that like this, how is this serving me, instead of why is this happening to me? Because it ends up being the mud or the fertilizer that the lotus grows from. So and
So nice.
whenever we're able to face it head on and extract the lessons from it, then we grow through it, and then we have it to thank afterwards. Because without that adversity, we wouldn't all be here together today with so much beautiful energy to combine.
Wow. So nice. Thank you, Trevor.
Thank you everyone. Hare
Thank you.
Thank you
Hare
all for sharing.
Krishna.
Hare
Hare Bol.
Haribol.
Hare Bol.
Hare Krishna.
Hare